The next Battlefield game has had a ton of information revealed by EA regarding what is coming for the next title. But new information today has been revealed by external sources that confirm something that EA have already hinted and alluded to, which is the existence of Battlefield's Battle Royale mode in the upcoming title expected to release in 2025. Now, this information comes from Insider Gaming and Tom Henderson, and whilst I do have some personal issues about leaking and also some personal issues regarding the general morality around it and the issues that it can cause for companies, it's safe to say that this is a triple plus standard type of source. This is a source that isn't going to be incorrect. Tom Henderson basically had the entire playbook for Battlefield 2042 in his back pocket, so really, him saying that something exists 100% is likely going to be the case for the next Battlefield game. I don't know where this guy gets his source from at EA, but at this point it wouldn't surprise me if Tom Henderson wasn't actually secretly some sort of double agent. Now, before we dive into what's coming to this Battle Royale, Tom Henderson confirms a couple of other little bits of information about the game universally. Namely, that the game is taking place between 2027 and 2030, with the single-player campaign focusing on a private military corporation going up against NATO. And all of this information will obviously bleed into the Battle Royale. There is also an aim for allegedly 45 different weapons on launch, which is double Battlefield 2042's, and 10 multiplayer maps, which would put it on par with Battlefield 1, Battlefield 3, and Battlefield 4. But let's get down to business and talk about the Battle Royale, because this is going to be a free release that comes with the next Battlefield title that is going to be free to play and will allow you to enjoy the Battlefield experience without paying for the AAA premium release. And this is a very interesting choice by Battlefield and EA because it basically puts them in a collision course trajectory with something like Call of Duty, and this is a Battle Royale that very easily could dethrone Warzone. Call of Duty Warzone is currently considered to be probably the most stagnant Battle Royale going right now. PUBG fans are also a little bit stagnant with what they've received over the last couple of years, and the scene is pretty ripe right now for a new BR to come in and exist. I mean, we're talking about Battlefield, which not only gets fundamentals like servers and hit reg down to a T, but also offers new things like destruction, which they did really well in their first outing of Firestorm, despite the fact that it was abandoned by DICE. So across the board, there is a consensus here that if Battlefield gets its Royale segment correct, it could be the most popular one on the market. So Insider Gaming confirms that this is going to be a free-to-play segment as part of the next Battlefield game, and also mentions that alongside the 45 different weapons that will bleed into this BR experience, there is a brand new destruction system as well. Not only should we expect the destruction that we've come to know from previous titles, including leveling buildings and taking them down to their core, but also a brand new micro-destruction system that's akin to Rainbow Six Siege, with different caliber-based weapons dealing different amounts of destruction to the environment around it, and a good example would be a high-caliber weapon being able to shoot off a door, or shoot off a segment of a wall, and also explosives being able to have similar powers. C4, for example, potentially being able to blow a hole in the side of a wall without collapsing the entire building. This effectively means that there's going to be an even deeper meta layer to destruction. In Battlefield Firestorm, the destruction generally revolved around leveling an entire building if somebody was camping inside, which is a very useful feature in a Battle Royale, and largely something that I think a lot of people want to see in the genre. But we're now also talking about the ability to be a bit more strategic with destruction, adding more depth to the first-person shooter experience, allowing you to knock out parts of walls, set up different defensive setups, or even potentially take out opponents with very sneaky, intelligent flanks. If you think about any traditional gunfight in the current version of Call of Duty Warzone, most of it's very linear due to the surroundings and the environment. Whereas in a game like Battlefield, the ability to knock out a stairwell, knock out a ceiling, or knock out a roof could be huge and instrumental in how this game expects to play. He also says that a core emphasis for this Battle Royale experience is Battlefield-like moments, which means that we could expect things like vehicles to be in the game, we can expect the sandbox environment from Battlefield to be featuring pretty heavily in this Battle Royale experience, which I actually think is the most successful way going forward. Now granted, there are going to be some areas that are a little bit frustrating to deal with. Whilst transport vehicles definitely won't be a problem in any Royale experience, adding things like tanks and attack helicopters can definitely be quite challenging and quite tricky, which means the Battlefield are going to have to find creative ways to integrate that as part of the sandbox environment into this Royale segment. But if you look at the Battle Royale market right now, and especially in the case of Call of Duty Warzone, most things tend to focus around sweating, metas, things being one way or the other, Whereas Battlefield is focusing on a sandbox environment in a BR, doing stupid shit like C4ing a Jeep into the side of a building, doing cool things like leveling a building or finding creative ways to attack opponents, doing things like driving a hovercraft up the side of a wall like you could in 2042. These are unique things that make Battlefield a sandbox shooter, and part of the reason people have enjoyed it so much in the past, because there was less emphasis about sweaty metas and things that people should care about, and more emphasis on this is how you can do something wacky in game that's actually surprisingly successful. New systems are also being integrated into the Royale experience, with the example being given of the ability to pick up and move downed players, which is a very handy feature to have, and even the most direct competitor to this being Call of Duty Warzone doesn't feature that ability. But arguably the most interesting detail around this new Battlefield Royale experience is the fact that it's going to be set in the United States, allegedly a tropical location, which is probably likely leaning towards something like Florida. And honestly, Florida makes a lot of sense for a Battlefield Royale because when you think about a sandbox environment, a place that has the general Florida man meme, very unique different takes on architecture that provide different biomes like dense urban areas and swampy environments, could actually be a pretty cool take on a BR map. I mean, having any Battle Royale map set in the United States is definitely a shift away from the past and the precedent that's been set by other games, which is a very exciting thing to think about in the first place. But when you incorporate the fact that Florida has some pretty unique architectures and pretty unique biomes, and the fact that Battlefield loves the odd dinosaur like crocodiles and alligators, then I think you're kind of onto a home run here. So we have a new BR with 40 odd weapons being included off the rip, with air, land, and sea vehicles likely included off the rip as well, an emphasis on battlefield moments in the game, and also a setting that's modern between 2027 and 2030, and also the fact that this map is going to be based out of the US of A. There is a lot to look forward to potentially about what this could bring to the table, especially if Battlefield gets it correct. Now, before I talk about the things that they need to do right, I do want to touch on something. I know a lot of people immediately are going to be compelled to go to the comments section and say, we don't want a BR, we just want a good Battlefield. And I entirely agree with that sentiment, and the reality is that Battlefield only works well if the core Battlefield experience works well itself. And things like classes, which potentially could feature in the BR experience, need to be nailed in properly in the main game before they can be ported to anything else. But it's worth bearing in mind something really important here. Battlefield 2042 was developed entirely by DICE and then had a bunch of studios added onto it in order to try and save the experience that had been crafted. Rather than these studios being support studios from the get-go that were actually working on their own projects, they were basically studios sent in to salvage what could have been a potentially wrong-going product. In the case of this next Battlefield title, DICE is focusing on multiplayer and single-player elements, Criterion are focusing on the single-player elements, so emotive, but there is an entire studio dedicated to just this third experience, which is a Battle Royale. So the core gameplay, the multiplayer experience, the single-player experience, and the things that matter to creating a good core Battlefield game have already been taken care of. And Ripple Effect, which are under the leadership of Vince Zampell, the man who literally brought Apex Legends to life, undoubtedly will be focusing on this BR experience themselves. So having a third free-to-play mode won't detract from those things. It also won't detract from a core Battlefield experience, and it very likely will bring new players to the franchise. On top of the fact that EA very generally is focusing on a system and platform-wide anti-cheat, which is being deployed in BF1 and other previous BF titles in preparation for this game releasing, and having a free-to-play element. So whilst I do understand the concerns about there being a third mode for Battlefield, and a lot of people are generally going to be skeptical considering the fact that Firestorm was basically made for DICE and then instantly abandoned, this is likely going to be a very different approach with a multi-studio effort, including multi-studio post-launch support. It's not like Ripple Effect are going to release this BR and then never touch it again, it's likely that they're going to be the dedicated studio for this free-to-play element. The proof is very much in the pudding and in execution, and whilst I don't think anybody should be pulling out their wallets to pre-order, especially considering what happened with 2042, there are some good signs here that Battlefield is actually learning from the mistakes that they've made in the past, and actually committing real resources and industry leaders like Vince Zampell in the correct direction. Just off the rip, this Battlefield Royale experience has a unique setting that's unlike anything we've seen in any other BR because the United States has basically been avoided as a map location. It has a destruction and micro-destruction system, it has core features like being able to pick up and revive your friendlies, and also potentially a large arsenal of weapons and vehicles to pick from to make it an interesting choice. And even more interestingly, Battlefield tends to do a lot of core things correctly that address a lot of aches and pains that other people have with other BRs in the space. Take for example Call of Duty Warzone, which is still to this day using terrible 20Hz server systems. Battlefield has been capable of handling 128 players on a 45Hz server in 2042. So hosting 128 player games on the Frostbite engine with 45Hz and decent hit reg isn't going to be a problem for them at all, and it has been for other BRs. Battlefield has historically had some of the best positional audio and general gameplay atmospheric audio throughout the entire industry, and has won multiple awards for being able to do it right. So it's very likely that this BR is again going to take a note from that and have industry-leading audio. And the general lack of interest in BRs recently is because there hasn't really been something that's offered something new. There hasn't really been destruction systems in BR. There haven't really been sandbox environments added to BR. And Battlefield will be the first Battle Royale to potentially offer a sandbox environment with detailed destruction systems, which is a huge want for people who play things like PUBG. With all of that said, there are some core things that Battlefield are going to have to get right about this BR experience. To start with, the server system. Although I've alluded to the fact that they can get this right and they have done historically, if they manage to offer a very compelling server offer that actually performs well, that's going to be a huge bonus for this game and really add to the sandbox environment. I also think destruction needs to be something that you can universally do on this map at big scales. I don't think it can be something that can be very gimmickly thrown in, it has to be lent into properly. Likewise, with the sandbox features, I don't want to see a boring Battlefield Royale game. I want to see a Battlefield Royale game where I can C4 Jeep something into the sky and then blow somebody up from below, because that's what Battlefield does best. I also think Battlefield can't focus on having too sluggish a game. Whilst Battlefield definitely is more of a middle ground and definitely not as blazingly fast as something like Call of Duty, it still needs to be a fluid and somewhat action-packed game. Slow battle royales with lack of engagements between different squads can create really boring gameplay moments and really dry mid-games, and having an action-packed mid-game is something that I think every BR should strive for to keep people engaged and interested. And this includes the ability to bring friendlies back into the game. There are so many games out there with dead space because you can't revive your teammates mid-round, and Battlefield should avoid that like the plague. And the final thing for me is balance, and this is something that actually, dare I say it, have a mild amount of hope for. Because the issue with balance in BRs is something that is so prevalent in games like Warzone and so prevalent in games like Apex, that if you don't get it right, it's extremely noticeable, and you can take any year out of the past 2 to 3 years of Call of Duty Warzone to identify what I'm talking about. Whether or not Battlefield has loadouts, or they just have, generally ground loot that you can customize, whatever it so happens to be, it needs to be balanced. And that is something that DICE, surprisingly in the past, have actually gotten quite good at, and I expect Ripple Effect to be the same, especially considering their expertise with Apex Legends, which tends to be quite good at addressing the meta. Balance is really key in a game like this, and I don't want to see 16 different updates in order to balance a single weapon. I want to see one update that quickly nerfs it, and then maybe 1 or 2 in the future that bring it back to a reasonable standard. It's very early fundamentally to be talking about this Battle Royale experience, but I really hope that they do learn the lessons that have been happening around the industry for BRs, and why people aren't interested in playing certain ones anymore. Whether it's an emphasis on ultra-sweaty, skill-based matchmaking embedded gameplay in Warzone that's caused fatigue and basically burned people out, or it's because mid-games have become boring, lackluster, and tedious in games like PUBG. If Battlefield can take all of the things that people dislike about other BRs and create their own unique amalgamation in their own game, they're onto a winning streak. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on the Battlefield Battle Royale information below. Again, I would like to reiterate, it's pretty much safe to say that this is 100% confirmed. I don't think this source is ever going to be incorrect, so don't worry about saying you don't think it's true. I think it just is the case. I want to hear your opinions on what's happening with this Royale experience. What do you want to see? What do you not want to see? And as always, thank you for watching.